This device would have released synthetic hormones, which in turn caused a chemical storm in her body, leading to severe hormonal dysregulation. The spinal fluid buildup was likely a result of a condition called intracranial hypertension, also known. The hormone imbalance can potentially be reversed, but it depends on several factors, including the root cause of the imbalance and the extent of the damage done to the body. In Elishba's case, the involuntary insertion of the IUD, likely a hormonal one, by UCLA during the emergency abortion appears to have been a significant trigger. This device would have released synthetic hormones, which in turn caused a chemical storm in her body, leading to severe hormonal dysregulation. The spinal fluid buildup was likely a result of a condition called intracranial hypertension, also known as pseudotumor cerebri or cerebrospinal fluid (CSF) imbalance, which can be caused by hormone fluctuations. In her case, the excessive hormonal levels may have disrupted the body's ability to properly absorb or regulate cerebrospinal fluid. This pressure buildup in the spinal cord could then lead to severe neurological symptoms: headaches, visual disturbances, hallucinations, and other neurological dysfunctions. Here are the primary causes of spinal fluid buildup in this context. 1. Hormonal imbalance. The IUD, or hormonal treatments administered during the abortion, could have spiked synthetic hormones like progestins or estrogens, altering her body's natural hormone levels. This disruption affects how the body regulates cerebrospinal fluid, potentially causing it to build up and exert pressure on the brain and spine. Number 2. Cerebrospinal fluid dysregulation. Hormones play a significant role in the production and absorption of cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. A prolonged imbalance could lead to an overproduction of CSF or a failure to absorb it, creating pressure within the spinal cord and brain, intracranial pressure. 3. Inflammation and trauma. The trauma from the rape, physical stress, and the resulting emotional toll may have also contributed to a systemic inflammatory response. Inflammation could affect her brain and spinal cord, exacerbating the buildup of CSF. 4. Undiagnosed conditions. Hormonal changes may have triggered or worsened underlying conditions, such as intracranial hypertension or hydrocephalus, both of which involve the buildup of excess fluid around the brain and spine. These conditions can be triggered by trauma, infections, or hormonal imbalances, which seem to all intersect in her case. Can the imbalance be reversed? Yes, but the treatment depends on addressing both the hormonal and neurological components. 1. Removal of the hormonal IUD. If the IUD is still in place, removing it would help stop the constant release of synthetic hormones into her system, which would be the first step toward restoring balance. 2. Hormonal therapy. After the removal, she would need hormone replacement or suppression therapy to recalibrate her body's natural hormonal levels. This could involve treatments to balance estrogen, progesterone, and possibly cortisol, all of which are likely to be severely dysregulated. 3. Management of cerebrospinal fluid. If the buildup of spinal fluid persists, medical interventions to relieve intracranial pressure may be needed. This could include medication like acetazolamide, which reduces CSF production, or in more severe cases, a lumbar puncture to drain excess fluid, or the installation of a shunt to help fluid drain properly from the brain and spinal cord. Therapy for trauma. The psychological impact of the rapes and her subsequent schizophrenia would need to be treated with a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and possibly antipsychotic medications to address the hallucinations and paranoia triggered by both trauma and her condition. The journey back to hormonal balance and neurological health would be long and complex, requiring a team of endocrinologists, neurologists, and mental health professionals working together to address both the biological and psychological components of her condition. Elishba's journey toward regaining mental control would be neither linear nor without resistance. Her mind, once razor sharp in its command of courtroom strategy, had been fractured by the weight of trauma, by the relentless assault of hormonal imbalance, and the suffocating pressure of fluid building in her spinal cord. To undo this spiral meant confronting not only the physiological root causes, but also the deep psychological scars that had taken hold of her mind. Regaining mental control. Step 1. Rebuilding trust in her own perception. For so long, reality had seemed an enemy. a shifting, unreliable landscape that betrayed her in her court battles, in her personal life, even in her own body. To regain control, she would first need to reconnect with her intuition, to trust again in the solidity of the ground beneath her feet. This wouldn't happen overnight, but as the pressure from the cerebrospinal fluid eased and her hormones settled, her grip on reality would slowly tighten. Cognitive therapy would serve as her guide through the labyrinth of her own mind. It would teach her how to question the intrusive thoughts, the paranoia, the hallucinations. The courtroom whispers she once thought were about her would become mere background noise, footnotes in a play she no longer starred in. Mindfulness practices would help her stay rooted in the present, the phantom smells that haunted her, the strange visions, the constant sense that she was being judged. All of these would lose their grip as she learned to bring her awareness back to the tangible world. Step 2. Processing trauma. Elishba had never fully processed the double rape, the forced abortion, the medical violations, each event layering trauma upon trauma until her psyche had been twisted, distorted by fear and violation. Regaining mental control would mean staring these horrors in the face, acknowledging them, and finding ways to integrate them into her narrative, not as definitions of her being, but as experiences she had survived. Trauma therapy would be essential here. Her mind had split in self-defense, allowing her to function, to fight in court, but it also built walls within her that prevented true healing. Slowly, these walls would have to be dismantled. Step 3. Reconstructing self-image. After enduring repeated violation of her body, of her autonomy, Elishba had internalized shame, guilt, and a fractured self-worth. The courtroom became the only place where she felt powerful, where she felt she had control. But to truly regain mental balance, she would need to reclaim her self-worth outside the court. This would involve a re-exploration of identity, who she was before the trauma, who she had become through it, and who she wanted to be on the other side. It would mean realizing that her worth was not defined by what had been done to her, but by how she chose to rise from it. Will reversing the imbalance change her personality? To a degree, yes, but this would not be a total transformation. It would be a restoration of balance rather than an erasure of who she had become. The hormone imbalance, the fluid buildup, these things had distorted her personality, making her more paranoid, more volatile, more prone to dissociation. As those pressures eased, the aspects of her that had been submerged, the sharp, intelligent, fiercely determined woman, would resurface. However, the experience would leave permanent imprints, one more cautious yet still fierce. She would emerge more guarded, aware of the fragility of her mind and body. But this caution would not be weakness. It would serve as a shield, a way of protecting the parts of herself she had nearly lost. Elishba, having experienced the darkest depths of physical and mental violation, would carry with her a deeper sense of empathy. She would understand trauma on a level few could, and that understanding would change the way she viewed others, especially those who found themselves crushed by the system she had learned to navigate. 3. Unshakable resilience. The trauma, the imbalance, the hallucinations. They hadn't broken her, and the restoration of her mind wouldn't erase the strength she had cultivated in surviving them. Elishba's resilience would be her defining trait, an unwavering will forged in the fires of trauma and tempered by healing. Conclusion. Elishba's path to mental recovery would be as much a fight as the legal battles she waged in court. Reversing the hormonal imbalance and draining the fluid would remove the physical obstacles clouding her mind, but the deeper work of healing would be internal. She would need to reconcile with her past, reclaim her trust in her own reality, and rebuild the parts of herself that had been lost to trauma. The Elishba that would emerge on the other side wouldn't be the same person she was before the trauma. She would be stronger, more whole, but also irreversibly shaped by the darkness she had endured. And as she stood once more in the courtroom, her sharp legal mind fully restored, she would fight not just for justice, but for the future she had regained piece by piece. Isopathic hypersomnolence, a silent force in the courtroom. Elishba's condition, isopathic hypersomnolence, became more than a medical ailment. It was a silent shadow cast over her every movement in the courtroom. This wasn't just about falling asleep uncontrollably. It was about navigating the world with an ever-present threat of slipping between reality and a deep, inescapable sleep. Her strategy in court, sharp as it was, had to account for this lurking menace, awaiting isopathic hypersomnolence, a silent force in the courtroom. Elishba's condition, isopathic hypersomnolence, became more than a medical ailment. It was a silent shadow cast over her every movement in the courtroom. This wasn't just about falling asleep uncontrollably. It was about navigating the world with an ever-present threat of slipping between reality and a deep, inescapable sleep. Her strategy in court, sharp as it was, had to account for this lurking menace, a weight that made every moment feel more precarious. Instead of the expected rhythm of courtroom battles where logic, timing, and attention are everything, Elishba had to adapt to the unpredictable. She knew that at any moment her body might give way, forcing her mind. Isopathic hypersomnolence, a silent force in the courtroom. Elishba's condition, isopathic hypersomnolence, became more than a medical ailment. It was a silent shadow cast over her every movement in the courtroom. This wasn't just about falling asleep uncontrollably. It was about navigating the world with an ever-present threat of slipping between reality and a deep, inescapable sleep. Her strategy in court, sharp as it was, had to account for this lurking menace, a weight that made every moment feel more precarious. Instead of the expected rhythm of courtroom battles where logic, timing, and attention are everything, Elishba had to adapt to the unpredictable. She knew that at any moment, her body might give way, forcing her mind into a half-dream state where reality blurred. Isopathic hypersomnolence became the invisible multiplier to every legal argument, a force that distorted her connection to the proceedings. It required her to prepare meticulously, more so than any other lawyer. The courtroom turned into a battlefield not just against her opponents, but against her own body. Knowing her episodes could strike at any time, she doubled her preparation. Everything had to be ready before court: notes, arguments, cross-examinations. It wasn't enough to rely on the spontaneity of legal arguments. Her cognitive sharpness had to be preemptive. Each document had to be prepared with precision, because the window of lucidity might be short. Number 2, strategic timing. Elishba would use her knowledge of when her body was most likely to succumb to the condition, choosing to present key arguments during moments of perceived clarity. She had an almost sixth sense for when the waves of fatigue would hit and used the time before these episodes to deliver the most impactful points, ensuring the court was swayed before the fog set in. 3. Adapting to lucid dreams. During the episodes where she slipped into a dreamlike state, her mind worked differently. She saw connections others couldn't. The court, the evidence, the law itself began to weave together in new, strange patterns. Sometimes, this dream logic became an advantage, a way of seeing through the mundane layers of legalese to the heart of the matter. But it was risky. If she stayed in that state too long, the court would see her as weak, as unreliable. She had to tether herself to reality just long enough to push the boundaries of her legal prowess. 4. Leaning on her team. When hypersomnolence hit too hard, she relied on her aides more. While she was incapacitated, the team had to execute her plans with the precision she had drilled into them. Her legal assistants became extensions of her mind, ready to take over at a moment's notice when she was forced to rest or drift off. The hormonal imbalance from her forced IUD insertion only deepened the mystery of her condition. As if hypersomnolence wasn't enough, the imbalance created a storm of new symptoms, each one dragging her deeper into both mental and physical chaos. 1. Unpredictable emotional swings. The hormonal imbalance brought on sudden and intense mood swings. In the courtroom, where control and calm are paramount, these episodes would erupt unexpectedly. One moment she was delivering a brilliant cross-examination, the next she was overcome by fury or panic. These mood swings put her at risk, as opposing counsel learned to capitalize on her emotional volatility, pushing her buttons to provoke a reaction that undermined her credibility. 2. Cognitive fog. Beyond the sleep attacks, the hormonal shifts exacerbated her cognitive clarity. Even when she was awake, her mind sometimes felt clouded, like trying to grasp thoughts through a thick fog. Arguments that once flowed easily now had to be wrestled out, as if her brain were working against her, forcing her to fight for every word, every coherent thought. Of 3. Hallucinations and paranoia. The fluid buildup, intensified by hormonal imbalance, distorted her perceptions further. She started to hallucinate faint smells, imagining a courtroom filled with an overwhelming sense of burnt metal or decayed flowers. These hallucinations threw her off balance, making her question her reality in crucial moments. Paranoia followed close behind, as she began to believe that the court, the judges, even her own team might be conspiring against her. Note 4, physical toll. The imbalance also manifested physically. Her migraines worsened. Waves of nausea and hot flashes attacked her body, leaving her vulnerable and physically weak. Some days she could hardly stand in court, relying on sheer willpower to present her case. Her hair thinned, her skin paled, and she often clutched at her stomach, half trying to steady the hormones that wreaked havoc within. Number 5, disrupted sleep-wake cycles. The imbalance compounded her narcoleptic symptoms, making it nearly impossible to discern day from night, rest from wakefulness. This was no ordinary insomnia or fatigue. It was a surreal blur of existence where sleep provided no rest and wakefulness held no clarity. The impact of reversing the fluid buildup. To reverse the buildup of spinal fluid, and by extension, regain some control over the hormonal imbalances, would be akin to releasing a floodgate. The pressure that had been building inside her skull, distorting her senses, her emotions, her very grasp on reality, would finally ease. The court, once a battleground where both law and her own body waged war, might become a place of clarity once again. Mental clarity restored. The nightmares, the hallucinations, the paranoia would slowly loosen their grip on her mind. As the fluid drained, the phantom smells, the overwhelming paranoia, and the auditory hallucinations that had whispered sinister conspiracies in her ear would fade. She would once again become the sharp-witted legal mind she had always been. Balance of emotions. As the pressure eased, so too would the violent swings of her emotions. The courtroom, no longer a place where she teetered on the edge of breakdown, would become a realm she could control. Her emotions, once volatile, would find equilibrium, allowing her to strategize and execute without the sudden bursts of rage or fear clouding her judgment. Physical resilience. With the pressure gone, her body would recover. The constant headaches would dissipate, the nausea would subside, and the intense physical pain that had been a constant companion would finally loosen its hold. She would stand straighter, her skin would regain its color, and she would feel her strength return. But most importantly, her sense of reality would solidify. She would no longer be lost in the shifting tides of hallucination and dream logic. She would once again see the courtroom for what it was, a place where truth could be won, a place where she could wield the full force of her mind and body in the pursuit of justice. The road would be long, and the scars, mental and physical, would remain, but reversing the fluid buildup would give her the chance to reclaim the core of who she had been before it all began. It wouldn't undo the trauma or the pain, but it would give her the strength to move forward, not just as a survivor, but as a warrior sharpened by fire.
Iran targeted Israel with over 180 ballistic missiles. Now it's been over 10 days. Is there a delay in Israel's response? And if so, what's the reason for the delay?
Israel has the right to defend itself, and Israel will defend itself. I won't go into specifics here, but we will ensure the security of our people, and we will protect our people. I can ensure it. This is something I can say for sure.
The ground situation right now, you're facing a threat on multiple fronts. The latest front where we are, the Haifa port right behind you, and Hezbollah continues to try and fire rockets into the Haifa Bay. They're targeting various parts of northern Israel. How grim is the situation according to you?
More than a year, Israel has
That
been
stomach
attacked
clutch wasn't just a
by
performance. It was her body screaming back at the
radical
system that had ignored
Islamists
her rights,
from
her
the
mind,
south,
and her
from the
autonomy for
south,
too long.
from the north,
You could see it in the way she doubled over
from
mid-argument,
from
her voice
7
rising above the corruption
directions.
as if
War in a war,
pain itself
we
became the
are,
fuel for her fury.
our war is the war of
And it
the
wasn't just
free world.
theatrics.
It's
This
not
was the real
only
Elishba,
ours war,
raw and
but it
unfiltered,
is a war
shredding through
for
their
our
lives with every
existence.
breath.
And
The
we
sheriff,
are going
standing there
to win this
smug,
war.
it was about survival. This was more than a courtroom battle. This was her reclaiming her humanity, her dignity, every right that had been stolen from her, from the forced IUD to the corrupt eviction schemes. She wasn't just fighting for the case, she was fighting for her existence. The sheriff tried to sidestep, saying, I'm not here to listen to the court of the garden, as if dismissing her passion and turning it into a joke. But Elishba wasn't backing down. She yelled louder, her body shaking from the pain. Yes, you're the levying officer. I thought the levying officer had to listen. You're breaking the law. And that's when the cracks showed. He didn't have an answer for her. He stood there thinking he was in control. But in reality, the system he was upholding was crumbling right there under the weight of her truth. Elishba's knowledge wasn't just theoretical, it was lived. Every injustice, every violation of her rights had been burned into her bones, and that's what made her powerful. This wasn't just about one corrupt sheriff, it was about all of them. Every officer, every judge who thought they could get away with bending the law to fit their convenience. Elishba was reminding them that the law was her shield, her sword, and her voice. This moment, it wasn't just an argument caught on video. It was a declaration of war. She was no longer playing by their rules, and she sure as hell wasn't backing down.